When I was originally thinking of the title for this video, I was going to call it Why We Hate Kaguya. However, I realized the reasons I don't like Kaguya don't really have anything to do with Kaguya. They had to do with her introduction and how it was handled. While I think at large it's far more fun to blame a character's faults completely on them as if they aren't literally being written by someone else, I reread Kaguya's portion in the manga to see if there were any things I disliked. To my surprise, there weren't all that many. But this introduction still rubs me the wrong way, and at large the community seems to agree with me, the majority of them agreeing Kaguya's introduction was handled either poorly or just pretty meh. I'm not going to be rewriting the story or anything here, that's not my intention, but I wanted to put Kaguya under a decently critical lens and determine whether or not Kaguya was good, I guess. I do Naruto analysis videos all the time, so if you like this type of content, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel, as I really appreciate it. Despite what that Reddit thread from 2017 told you, Kaguya does not just appear in the story unannounced when Zetsu stabs Madara in the back. There are a decent amount of things you can point to in the rest of the manga that build up Kaguya's existence in the story. Some of these are going to cause you to be somewhat more generous to Kishimoto in his writing, but they exist nonetheless. This first one sort of stretches the imagination, and that's Kimimura's existence. For the ones who don't remember, Kimimura's full name is Kimimaro Kaguya. He's of the Kaguya clan, and the Kekkei Genkai for this clan in a nutshell is the ability to use bones either as a ridiculously strong defense or a super strong offense. Kaguya has these same abilities, and she looks strikingly similar to Kimimaro. Obviously, Kimimaro doesn't have the Byakugan or Rinne Sharingan, but he does have these two dots on top of his forehead and the same white hair that Kaguya sports. Obviously, Kaguya would by all accounts be an upgraded Kimimaro because her bones have the power to literally disintegrate anything they come into contact with, and even someone like me who disagrees with this being built up for her existence can't deny all the similarities that they share. Now, this can go one of two ways from this point. Either Kishimoto installed Kimimaro in his clan here to build up Kaguya, or hinted Kaguya's existence long before she would formally be mentioned in the story, or Kaguya having a similar design to Kimimaro and using these techniques as a callback to what he wrote before in order to turn Kimimaro into a kind of retroactive foreshadowing. This all has to do with intent. When Kishimoto first introduced the Kaguya clan, was the intent to foreshadow, or was the intent to give Orochimaru a strong vessel in order to see what could have been, and then he called back to it later with the introduction of Kaguya? I think it's far more impressive if Kishimoto introduced Kimimaro with no plan on introducing Kaguya, and when he did introduce her, he thought to call back to a character he had created long ago. Kishimoto talks about his struggles with writing weekly manga and the story of Naruto in a recent interview from just last year he did with France, that I'll leave linked below. The interviewer asked a question. The Boruto series opens with the scene advanced in time before offering a very long flashback. Can you tell us about this choice of a tease and fratricidal duel? And Kishimoto admits he did it just to hook the viewers, but didn't have any specific ideas for the rest of the story, and then gives us some more insight with how he was writing Naruto. At the time of Naruto, I was used to following a weekly pre-publication, so I had a very short deadline to draw. When I had ideas, I threw them into the plot like that before seeing what I could do with them later. This is obviously not 100% proof that Kishimoto never built anything up or something like that, but there are people out there that think Kishimoto isn't human and that everything about Naruto was planned out start to finish, so I don't really agree with Kimimaro being foreshadowing for Kaguya. I think Kishimoto, like he says in the interview, probably just figured out what he could do with it later and tied it into Kaguya. I'm trying my best to cover this information in chronological order, and from here we don't really get another, hint at Kaguya for a while, when Zetsu is watching Naruto and Sasuke and notes that things are getting interesting. I suppose it's also worth pointing out that Sasuke maybe senses Zetsu after his battle with Naruto, and I can see the setup. However, I think Zetsu is probably the least convincing evidence you could use for anything regarding foreshadowing for Kaguya. You have Zetsu in the fight against Itachi being surprised about a Susanoo and what it is, even though by this point he should have seen both Madara Susanoo and Indra's. I think Zetsu's comment here at the end of part 1 works well in retrospect as foreshadowing for Kaguya, but as it stood when it was originally written, I think he was probably just gathering intel for the Akatsuki on what would be Orochimaru's next vessel. After this, we go a while without anything being mentioned for Kaguya, with the next big thing being this comment from Nagato, and this one has to be the least convincing so far. When Nagato is talking to Naruto about his relationship to the character in the book Jiraiya wrote, he comments, "It feels like someone set it all up, or perhaps this was the doing of an actual god." This is a stretch further than even Piccolo's arms could reach. I can see where someone might confuse this for foreshadowing if you read it and then just don't think about the context at all. Then yeah, you could probably say this foreshadows Kaguya's existence. The problem is, Kaguya didn't set up the connection between Naruto and the book. In fact, no one set that up, not even Zetsu. The very idea Zetsu wrote all of Shinobi history is blown way out of proportion. Of course, Zetsu did some manipulation, but even with Madara, the only thing Zetsu did to lead Madara down the path he did was alter what was written on the Uchiha stone tablet. We know Zetsu never approached Madara before this because Madara thinks he created him on his deathbed. Zetsu also didn't set up Naruto and Sasuke fighting, as when the fight ends, he says things are starting to get interesting and he's talking to himself, so there's no reason for him to lie. Overall, this doesn't foreshadow anything. It's Nagato essentially pointing out how absurd a coincidence it all is. This is the last thing I'm going to bring up in regards to things I don't think are foreshadowing before I get into things I believe actually foreshadow Kaguya, and that's the Ten Tails' existence. We first get mention of the Ten Tails in chapter 467, where Obito describes to the 5 Kage why he wants to gather all the Biju. The Ten Tails is here with a Rinne Sharingan, and later we see the eye being reflected off the moon. Obviously, the thing here would be the fact that Kaguya is the Ten Tails, and the Rinne Sharingan as well as the eye on the moon are things she's done in the past. I have a few problems with this line of reasoning, first being that Kaguya didn't use the moon to cast the infinite Tsukuyomi, and this is provable. While she did use the moon to cast it in the anime, as non-canon filler and the manga states otherwise, which I'll get into in a minute. One of the primary reasons Kaguya didn't use the moon to cast infinite Tsukuyomi is that there simply was not a moon to cast it off of, because Hagoromo and Hammer created the moon when they sealed the Ten Tails away. If Kaguya did bring a moon into existence via a portal, you would see 2 moons in the sky in Naruto, but there's only one. Secondly, this is just to prove my point. Hagoromo says Kaguya used her Sharingan and Byakugan powers to cast the infinite Tsukuyomi on the populace. The wording here is important. If Kaguya were to cast infinite Tsukuyomi off of the moon, it would envelop the entire world and everyone in it. If that were to happen, then there would be no humans and the story would effectively not have happened. Hagoromo though says that she cast the jutsu on the populace, and populace can mean the entire people of a country or area. While this can mean she cast it on the entire world, I just explained why that wouldn't really make any sense. She probably just casted it on the people of a specific area or even an entire country. The Rinne Sharingan the Ten Tails has, I guess, could be foreshadowing for Kaguya, but I think it makes just as much sense as an author to give Kaguya a Rinne Sharingan, considering the way she was going to be revived, and Madara also awakened the Rinne Sharingan. But let's get one thing straight. I think by the time of the war arc, Kaguya had already been thought up as a character, but I think now is a good time to reiterate, or maybe this is the first time I'm mentioning it, I can't remember. Kaguya's existence isn't the problem. It's when and how she was brought into the story that's the problem. That brings me to the last point I want to make in reference to Kaguya's revival being foreshadowed. That's the appearance of the ghetto statue in this bamboo-like state we see it in when Madara is showing Obito his fake Tsukuyomi. This would be virtually lost on anyone who isn't Japanese, and that includes me. Someone had to point this out to me. Kaguya Hime the Bamboo Cutter is the inspiration for Naruto's own Kaguya Otsutsuki, although Kaguya in Naruto is a much darker reimagining of that character. I won't list all the connections between them here, but one of the most important for this foreshadowing discussion is Kaguya Hime's portrayal inside of this bamboo stalk. This is when she's just a baby, but in Naruto, when Madara is describing to Obito how he got the Rinnegan, the ghetto statue is depicted inside a bamboo flower, similar to how Kaguya Hime was depicted. The in-universe reason for this is that Madara placed it here so he could use it as a catalyst for making more Hashirama cells, but since this is the Ten Tails husk and the Ten Tails is Kaguya, this depiction does seem like a good bit of foreshadowing that admittedly could be lost on the Western audience of Naruto as a whole. However, I think this points in the direction of foreshadowing Kaguya as a being, not Kaguya as someone who will eventually come into the story, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit later. Now that we've spent about 10 minutes talking about the foreshadowing, or lack thereof in some cases, we can talk about the actual big reveal of Kaguya, and I think the point of this is to be surprising. I don't think we were meant to guess this. I think Kishimoto does a fine job encompassing just who Kaguya is prior to her introduction and why she's such a threat. The problem is that it just doesn't point to her revival being at hand. I guess I shouldn't say problem, however, because this isn't really a problem. Like I said, the point of this is just to be a surprise, and you have everything about it sort of leaning that way. Zetsu stabs Madara in the back and reveals he's not Madara's will, he's Kaguya's, but we literally saw Madara make Zetsu, but that was revealed to be a misdirection by him. Obviously, Madara just accomplished his goal and he's at the precipice of his power, and the very fact that most of this gets exposition dumped explained to us after the revival happens kinda tells you stuff just took a big turn. This also, I'll say in a vacuum, is not a bad thing. I think it's disingenuous to claim you don't like a good surprise in a story, and if you aren't being disingenuous, I'd just say you don't like fun, then I'd point and laugh at you. The problem with Kaguya's surprise is that it comes at the cost of Madara, and literally everybody loves Madara. And beyond that, it comes at the cost of Madara before he's defeated. And I can't help but finding myself agreeing with this sentiment, especially since taking it another route would have taken up one more chapter at the most. Another Naruto and Sasuke versus Madara fight would take a chapter. There is an easy excuse for Madara being weakened with him just having casted the Infinite Tsukuyomi. So let them get that dub and then have Zetsu stab Madara in the back when he's on his last legs. There are all sorts of cool and thematic reasons why Zetsu should stab Madara in the back, so that of course has to stay. Just have it happen at a different part and you fix the main issue a lot of people have with the ending. So when it's all said and done, Kaguya's existence is mentioned before she comes back, but there isn't sufficient build up for her return. Something I don't think is a bad thing in a vacuum, but a negative in the fact that in bringing Kaguya out as a surprise, you get rid of Madara as a surprise. And that at the end of the day is just not a trade that's satisfying to read through, although it is exciting. That being said, while I have my gripes with it, I don't hate it. I can't bring myself to say it's something I hate. If I had to give it a grade, I'd say I'd give it a D+, which is passing, but not the type of grade you want to see on your final. This next issue with Kaguya is kind of small in the grand scheme of things, but she is too strong. I find this criticism short-sighted on one hand and hypocritical of the Naruto community on the other hand. Let's start with the hypocrisy. When I first got done with Naruto back in 2019, the ever so stupid misconception that Kaguya was made because Madara was too strong to beat was still very popular, but on the other hand, I'd hear Kaguya was too strong as well. And that's why they had to seal her away. And sometimes those criticisms would come from the same people, but I won't call out anybody in particular. While it is true Naruto or Sasuke individually were not stronger than Kaguya when they fought her, let's be real here for a moment. One of the key things Naruto teaches you is to let other people help you and know when you need help. Kaguya being too strong is kind of the entire point. To the extent I don't view people saying this as a criticism, I think it's a sign someone paid attention, they just didn't know what they were watching or reading for. Which is why I called it short-sighted, because the people who voice this criticism, even though I don't view it as one, full well mean this to be a criticism of the series. The last thing to really do with Kaguya is sort of analyze the fight she had with Team 7 and Obito, because as I said in the intro, when I went back to reread this fight, I didn't have that many issues with it. The fight itself is pretty short. This doesn't even really take up the length of an entire volume, but the beginning of the fight is sort of exactly what you'd expect from someone with the lore that Kaguya does have. She's bulldozing Naruto and Sasuke fairly easily in the beginning. She blows Naruto back with her vacuum fist, she destroys Sasuke's perfect Susanoo, and just when they get their footing, she appears behind them and starts to absorb their chakra while somehow paralyzing them at the same time. Naruto eventually gets tired of being paralyzed and breaks it somehow, and then the duo get ready to use Naruto's reverse harem jutsu. So with Sasuke's Amaterasu as a distraction, they launch it. The plan is actually decent enough to almost work. Pretty funny knowing Kaguya is a gooner, but it's not too relevant to the video. Nonetheless, this plan fails in the end, and Kaguya switches dimensions, and then thanks to Zetsu, she makes the decision to split Naruto and Sasuke up. I've seen people wondering why Kaguya didn't just send Sasuke to the acid dimension here, and I can see how someone would be confused, but Kaguya doesn't plan to kill Naruto and Sasuke yet. She just wants to absorb their chakra. She has to think hard about even wanting to kill Naruto because of how much chakra he has. Anyway, Naruto has to fight Kaguya solo for a while, and with the aid of Boil Release, he does get in one good hit on her. Other than that, it's pretty much Shadow Clone spam and misdirection, but considering this opponent, I find this performance personally pretty impressive. While Naruto is doing this, Obito and Sakura are looking for Sasuke in a different dimension. When they eventually find him, everybody is reunited before it seems like Naruto is killed by Kaguya, only for it to be revealed to be a Shadow Clone, which again is very impressive. I'd also just to randomly throw Madara his props here. He can see through Shadow Clones, and even Kaguya using his body as a vessel can't seem to do that. One issue I have comes from here though. When they all get back together, why does Kaguya not just split them up again? Kaguya uses a large amount of chakra to shift the world, sure, but nothing implies she uses a large amount of chakra to enter her portals or take someone else through one. Why doesn't she just send Sasuke to the acid dimension this time? The only reason her and Zetsu reasoned to kill Naruto in the first place was because of the threat of Naruto and Sasuke if they reunited again, but for some reason they choose to switch to a heavy gravity dimension instead, and that just doesn't really make sense to me. The manga also doesn't make it convincing that Kaguya doesn't just do this again to Sasuke. Zetsu even says to Kaguya that at this point they can't afford to save chakra. It's not like Sasuke puts up a defense on his back with Susanoo or anything like that. And admittedly, Kaguya might just not know this next thing, but Sasuke didn't even have access to his ability to teleport at that moment. So it's just kind of weird to me. Obito's death is cool. I actually like it. It's one of my favorite characters, so seeing him go kind of sucked, but he deserved it, I can't lie. Naruto gets extremely mad at Zetsu making fun of Obito and cuts off Kaguya's arm through a mental amp. Then using all of the Biju power in the different Rasen Shuriken, he makes Kaguya unstable, causing her to do unstable things. At the same time, Obito is giving Kakashi his Sharingan back in the afterlife, so we can get the strongest character in the original series, DMS Kakashi, who saves Sakura. Kaguya restabilizes and Team 7 do their final mission to take her down. Now, I could whine and moan about the punch Sakura landed, but honestly, it really just stretches my suspension of disbelief. This is Sakura, who just couldn't do anything to Madara at all, who was way weaker than Kaguya before Kaguya got what Zetsu calls exponentially stronger. She also just barely outran a hand from Kaguya and had to be saved. So the fact that Sakura could land this hit, let alone that it could do anything to Kaguya, like I said, just sort of stretches my suspension of disbelief. I personally buy more into Kaguya was just off guard and not paying attention to Sakura as she hadn't been doing the entire time. Sakura's line, "Don't forget about me, I'm a woman too," sort of makes me think that's what Kishimoto was going for as well. But this is what does it. Kaguya is sealed away and the world is saved. I actually really enjoyed this on my reread despite the two minor complaints I had. This pen on them all attacking Kaguya is just extremely cool, and besides that, every member of Team 7, aside from Sasuke, really shines in this fight. I've been very open about my dislike for Sakura, despite that I never call her useless though. But it's nice to see Sakura's use being at the forefront this time, instead of something you kinda have to read between the lines for, or might accidentally skip over. No, if Sakura doesn't give Obito the chakra she has, then Sasuke does not get saved, end of discussion. So I guess in the end, I'd say Kaguya was good. If I had to give it a rating, I'd give it a 8.1 out of 10 or a B-. That's pretty much all I have to say though. Honestly, I don't even know what the title of this video is going to be. I just been wanting to talk about Kaguya for a really long time, and here it is. So obviously leave a like on the video if you liked it and subscribe to the channel, but other than that, have a nice day.